Oh, the Golden Stallion is here, and we're going to talk about, well, last week. Which, of course, last week was PorcFest. Started, what was it, June 22nd to the 25th or whatever? What's say, 26th? Yeah, to the 25th. Started on Wednesday. I guess technically there were some mini events before then. I don't mean that as any kind of insult. So if you were at Somalia Fest or whatever the fuck they were calling it, I'm not knocking you. That's fine. But yeah, it was, I was there all week. I was there from Tuesday, all the way till, right through into Sunday. In fact, I even stopped by, Stephanie and I, we stopped by on that Sunday, to say goodbye to everybody. I mean, that's kind of one of the first things about PorcFest. We'll break this all down. But basically what I'm doing, well, one of the things you do at PorcFest is you run into people that you haven't seen in a while or people that you get to meet for the first time, etc. And so, you want to say proper goodbyes, etc. and hang out, one last time and everything. Anyway, we're going to talk about PorcFest. I'm going to give my review here. That is the purpose of this little Patreon episode, to tell you what I thought of it. Certainly in the past, I have been very critical of the event for a multitude of reasons, even before I was really I guess you could say, a thing. When I went to my first PorcFest, Sovryn Tech didn't exist yet. I wasn't on the radio for anything. At the time, I was Stephanie's boyfriend. So, that's kind of how people knew me. So that was, it was very interesting. Anyway, I'm not going to give you a whole rundown of my history at PorcFest, but bottom line is that, in the past, I've over the years, and I think this might have been, so my first one was 2012, and the first one that I missed was last year. So I guess I've been to 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2017. This would be my fifth PorcFest. There, you heard me count it all down. How about that? And this might be one of my favorites. Maybe next to the first one or so. This might be my that I went to. This might have been my favorite one of the bunch. And yeah, like I said, we'll break this down. I'll talk about everything that went on there. Of course, if you listen to this week's Sovryn Tech already, episode 231, that was all recorded right at PorcFest on Saturday. People just walked up. Of course, it was great. We had Lynn Albrecht walk up. Ellen Ball was there. And of course, Paige Peterson. Also, Dan Kroll was there. Who's a patron will probably hear this. It was an awesome gathering of people. Ryan Taylor, of course. And all just came together and just talked about whatever. We talked about all kinds of shit the whole time, for just about 2 hours. I left some room to talk about my book, which I might talk about that a little bit more here during this episode. So, but if you heard that, well, you heard some of what happened at PorcFest. And also last week on Patreon, Patreon only, I released recordings of two of my talks at PorcFest. So I did technically a third one. I didn't know that it would shape up to be a talk. Pretty much everybody just wanted to ask me questions. And so originally I had set it up. It was going to be a workshop. That's the way that the guy who really helped, it really made my PorcFest an enjoyable experience, that being Roger Paxton, who I just love, and admittedly is also, he's on the Resist the Empire podcast, Star Wars Libertarian podcast, which is also a sponsor of Sovryn Tech. Originally we had thought of it as a workshop, and we'd have, I was going to have Paige there, and I was going to have Stephanie there, and they were going to help, people set up their stuff and whatever. And it just turned into a Q&A, which I'm sure, pleased them because they didn't have to work then. And, I'm just getting grilled with these questions and, having to answer them, whatever, that was tons of fun. Don't confuse what I'm saying here. So did that, but I didn't record that because, like I said, originally I just thought it was going to be a workshop and I wasn't going to record it. I kind of wish I did because it was a lot of fun, even though a lot of the questions were, there was a lot of people that just came over from, because it was right after my main talk, which was about, reclaiming privacy in a mobile world, right? They all just moved over to this tent where I ended up talking. It was really, I was honored. It was amazing to have that many people come over. I ended up packing both events. I ended up packing the pavilion, and then I ended up packing this huge tent. with people. I mean, it was standing room only, at both things, which was, again, I'm honored. But yeah, so when everybody came over, I mean, a lot of the questions, I mean, there were some Sovereign Tech listeners there. I got to meet some very cool Sovereign Tech listeners that I know I've wanted to meet for a very long time. You know who you are. I stopped and I talked to you. And it was, a lot of the questions were stuff that maybe Sovereign Tech listeners, especially longtime Sovereign Tech listeners, already know. Like I've already covered these things, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of new people that came on board, and which is nice. And I've seen a very nice bump in my listenership numbers because of that. And so, that's great too. That's really turned out very well. But, I had plenty of people tell me they came to PorcFest to see me, or they came to see me and Stephanie, or maybe me, Stephanie, and Brett Venat, or whatever, But in fact, that was fun. That was probably the thing I heard the most, was that there was 3 people that everybody wanted to meet. And that was me, Stephanie, and Brett Venat, of course, of the School Sucks podcast, which, I mean, that's fine company for me to be in, as far as like who wants to get caught, or, who wants to be seen. So yeah, boy, where do we take this from here? So let's scroll it back to the beginning and talk about this. And again, overall, and I think I already kind of said this, overall, I enjoyed my time. I had a really good time. I could talk about past critiques. Maybe I'll save that for later on in this episode, if I think to do it. But I didn't really have much in the way of critiques for this, but we'll keep going here. So anyway, Stephanie and I, we stayed off site. We weren't directly on, because like at PorcFest, which is at Rogers Campground in Lancaster, New Hampshire. For those that don't know, PorcFest is the Porcupine Freedom Festival. It's run by the Free State Project, which I'm technically a participant of. I'm actually mover number 966. I'm within the first 1,000. And it's all about people just wanting to get together and create liberty in their lifetime within a very specific geographic area. And PorcFest is sort of a festival to kind of like convince people to come along. It's very similar to in the 90s. I mean, it's almost like a libertarian Burning Man of sorts, you could say. Not exactly to that extreme, but even Burning Man, both Burning Man and I think what PorcFest is trying to be is based off of Hakeem Bey's work, Temporary Autonomous Zones, where you have festivals that are like in Hakeem Bey's work, which is an anarchist work. I actually enjoy the book. I know there are some questions about Hakeem Bey and some of his tastes that are, obviously he wouldn't be invited to PorcFest. But anyway, the concept is that you like with temporary autonomous zones, okay, that Hakeem Bey was talking about, or even what he also called PAZs, which were permanent autonomous zones, which the term PAZ might be known to some Sovereign Tech listeners. I actually get it from Hakeem Bey. Anyway, the concept is that you hold festivals to try and like find people that you can bring into your little freedom, your little anarchist community. And Hakeem Bey is an anarchist. He has another name too, Peter Lombard Wilson, but whatever. Anyway, and so that that's the notion. And PorcFest is certainly a siren song to try and get people to say, look, this is how it can be here. If all of us get to 20,000 people, which is what the Free State Project is trying to, which they have that many signers, but that's what they're trying to bring in, to the Free State Project. If we get 20,000 people into New Hampshire, then this is how life can be like. Like, that's kind of the notion. So it's definitely a way to, to attract people into the Free State Project, into this geographic area. And obviously it works. I mean, it works for a lot of people. For a lot of people, PorcFest, they will tell you, and I think they're dead serious about it, that it's the greatest week of their life. Like, I mean, they absolutely fall in love with it. Now, I don't hold it in that high a regard. In fact, there's events that I kind of like more, but that's not a slight or a knock against PorcFest, really. So anyway, that's what PorcFest is. So at PorcFest, it's in this huge campground. There is there's little hotel rooms effectively that you can stay on there, and then just a bit down the street there is the Cabot Inn, which is a hotel, separate hotel itself. I mean, it's walking distance. You can get there very quickly. But Stephanie and I we were both off site from that. We weren't even, at like on site at PorcFest. And we had a lot to do. Part of that being, I mean, and we didn't know how much we were actually going to be there. Stephanie ended up, pulling some volunteer shifts for free aid. It's fr33aid.com if you want to find out more about that, which is just like this volunteer medical service. And of course, Stephanie, she's a PhD. She was going for her MD as well. I mean, she's as legitimate, in my opinion, as a medical practitioner about as you can, as you can get without graduating with the MD. And even then, so regardless, so we ended up being there pretty much every day of the event because either I was speaking, or Stephanie was pulling some kind of volunteer shift with free aid. But yeah, we stayed off site and we didn't spend like tons of hours at PorcFest, but we were definitely there to varying degrees on every day. And so, while we were at the hotel, so the first couple days, so here was a goal that I had to achieve for PorcFest to understand why I wasn't perhaps on site all the time. Was because I had the book that I talked about on this past week's episode of Sovereign Tech, episode 231, which is Dark Android, the 2017 edition. Okay, which is a guide on how to, implement mobile security best practices and reclaim privacy, etc. Doing that, writing that book, like I had to finish it, I had to make it happen. I spent a good amount of time in the hotel room doing that. The hotel we were staying at, I was writing, finishing up that book, chopping a lot of stuff off. I could do a whole special talking about what it took to make that book. And I may do that in the future. I don't think I'm going to end up doing that here. Some people have already bought the book. If you want to buy a copy, all you got to do is go to darkandroid.info and you can get your hands on it. 150 pages, tons of screenshots. It's a step-by-step how-to guide for implementing all this different shit. So anyway, I had to finish this book. I finished it like Wednesday night. Okay, so I got there Tuesday, and like the first night of PorcFest, I finally finished it that Wednesday night. But then Thursday, I was working on all day pretty much on getting it published, getting it up on Kindle and everything. And fortunately, like Thursday night, it was done. It was done. I had, in fact, that day, that Thursday, I had a talk to give, which if you're a patron, you might have heard it last week, and you still can go listen to it. But I had a talk on mesh networking as a part of Alt Expo with Paige Peterson, and it ended up also being Ryan Taylor there. It was a tremendous talk. People loved it, that whole time that I'm like giving this talk, I'm like, okay, are they going to let my book pass? It's like, I got to have it for tomorrow so that people can buy it when they're hearing my talk, on Friday, which was the talk about reclaiming privacy in a mobile world. So obviously the book Dark Android directly addresses what I'm talking about during that. And so that was kind of hairy, making sure that happened. It did happen at like 9 p.m. or something that night, Thursday night. Which I guess it would have been the 22nd, maybe, or the 23rd. The book, Kindle, I got the email and it said, your book is published, bravo, well done, etc. Do this, do that. Great. So that was out, and then I could finally breathe and actually relax a little bit. And so then Friday, we spent a good amount of time going to, I had the talk at 3:00 on Friday that was, reclaiming privacy in a mobile world. And then I had the workshop right after that. And so I did both of those. Again, like I said earlier, I was actually everything, like even the mesh networking talk, it was all packed houses. And that really meant a lot to me. I wanted to get all kind of Golden Stallion about it and be like, I put the asses in seats, baby. But, I didn't, I wasn't going to be that crass. But it was just a great time. And then Saturday, I had to record. Stephanie had a shift for free aid that was like 2 hours long. I spent that 2 hours right by the free aid tent recording Sovereign Tech. So every day I had something going on. Every day I had something to do. I really wish there's a lot of people I would have loved to have had on Sovereign Tech. I would have absolutely loved to have made that happen. Roger Paxton in particular, I would have loved to have him on. It would have been really cool. Part of what I think made that so tough is that there was no, and this is a little bit of a critique of of PorcFest that I have a couple to make, but one of them is that there is no media room. So in PorcFests of yore, there's like this one main kind of conference room. Okay, and it's a camping site, so you can imagine. I mean, it's a nice conference room for it's a nice room for what for where you are. It's no knock on them. But that was always the media room for years, and it's where Free Talk Live would air. It's where all kinds of podcasts could take advantage of equipment by Ian Freeman, who Ian Freeman is not allowed to be at PorcFest. Even though I guess he was there the night before recording Free Talk Live with Roger Paxton, which I appreciate that being made available. Anyway, usually it was a wild, just a great little place where everybody could kind of get together and everybody could take advantage of the professional equipment there, and everybody could do live shows. I mean, this was a very popular thing. People would just go and hang out in the media room and watch all the podcasts and radio shows that were being done there. And it was strange not having that, because that for me is a huge draw for going to PorcFest, is getting to see these live shows, being a part of these live shows. Like every year, after I would become known, because of Sovryn Tech, I'd get asked to be on all kinds of shows while I was there. And it was just a lot of fun. You'd line up guests and everything, and it just made for a really great time. But that's not a part of the program anymore. So if it was, maybe things could have been a little more interesting. I could have been a little more formal with what guests I had on. I was, fortunately, the guests that came on, it was all very gracious and wonderful. It worked out great. But there it is. So, there's a lot of people I would have loved to have on. I would have loved to have had Tatiana Moroz on. She performed there and was incredible. And she gave a talk and all that. I mean, all that ended up, just being wonderful. But there's a lot of people I really would have loved to have had on. I would have loved to have had a spot where because I know there were a lot of Sovryn Tech listeners there. I know how many people emailed me saying, I'm only going to PorcFest to catch you, blah, blah, blah. It would have been so cool to have that one place. I mean, and I know some people had, I think Roger had a nice setup, but it just, the communication didn't work. It just wasn't as simplistic as okay, let's go to the media room and make it happen there. But anyway, it would have been great to have everybody, to have an audience and all that stuff. That's a lot of fun. Because I did Sovryn Tech Live there once. And once again, it was a packed house. Everybody wanted to get on the mic. It was such a great time. I would have loved to have done that again. But just for varying reasons, it didn't work out, this year. So that was kind of weird, not having the media room. That was new to me, because I didn't go last year, and I guess there wasn't really a media room last year either. I could be wrong about that, but whatever. That was kind of strange. As far as other things, about PorcFest, definitely felt like there was a lot less people there, a lot less people. And there's this popular thing that people do at night at PorcFest. There's a bonfire, nearby the main pavilion, and usually people will, stand around this bonfire and whatever. People are doing, what they do. And they are, usually people are talking, or they're consuming things, if you know what I mean. And whatever. I mean, it's not really, I don't really care, personally, I don't really care to stand around the fucking bonfire, often because you're having to deal with a lot of people hey, you want to do this? Hey, you want to do that? And I just, no, I don't. And I don't care that people want to do it. That's fine. It's just not my thing. Okay. That's all. It's just not my thing. It can be your thing. Relax. I'm not going to, I don't care if you do it. Your body, whatever, go ahead, rock and roll. So I'm not the biggest fan of really doing that, but kind of ended up at least checking it out. One night I was around it for a good while, but otherwise, I kind of just ended up looking around and checking it out. And it seemed usually there's so many people, you can't even get close to the fire, because there's so many people standing around it. And it just seemed like this year there weren't that many people standing around it. Now, maybe that doesn't mean that there were less people. Maybe there's just more people of my particular flavor that just don't, that's just not their thing to do. That's entirely possible. I don't know how all that worked out. So there was concern, speaking of around the fire, there were concerns that that I've been made aware of. that Reason Magazine was there. Not uncommon, like Nick Gillespie of Reason, he's often a guest and a speaker there. But Reason Magazine was like taking a lot of pictures of people like exchanging drugs, doing a deal and taking them and all this different stuff. And some people felt like, boy, do we really need to be taking pictures of all this and maybe putting it on a website or in a magazine or something? Well, I mean, about that, well, all right, so I'll tell you this. First off, yeah, just on a personal level, I'm not saying they can't take those pictures. I'm just saying I think that's kind of dumb. I really, unless you're just publishing, I mean, even then, like you could say, well, what if they're publishing it in California or Colorado, where marijuana is legal and all this shit. Well, obviously, I'm not going to confirm anything, but I could imagine that there's a whole hell of a lot more, just marijuana going around, right? So, yeah, I thought that was just bad taste, bad form, to do. I mean, like you read about, stories from like The Guardian or other journalistic publications that have integrity, where they won't take pictures of what's going on. They'll describe what's going on to you in a story, like say if it's a drug deal or something else that's happening. But they wouldn't take pictures. So I thought that was kind of a dick move on their part, especially when the Free State Project has been, in the past, to much criticism, from myself included, has been kind of against, say, certain events being recorded or pictures being taken or, things like this. Think of like a Liberty Forum where they had Edward Snowden. And there was for what the Free State Project is, a fairly large scandal over the fact that they didn't want anybody recording, but people recorded the Edward Snowden talk anyway. And I get it. There's a fine line to walk here. It's like, oh, wait a minute. So you want us to allow you to record the Edward Snowden thing, but then you're pissed off that you're taking pictures of drug deals. Well, I think these are two very different things. And I think, complaining about that argument is that's dubious to try and say that they're in any way comparable. They're really not. But anyway, there's other people that were walking around, people that I consider, speaking of questionable integrity, that I think have very questionable integrity, who just seem to be obsessed with like taking pictures. In fact, there's one guy in particular who I don't know that I need to name, but he's well known in the Liberty Movement for taking pictures like all the fucking time. Honestly, I think, no offense to photographers. I have great friends. I have people that I care deeply about that are professional photographers. But I think people that just go around at conferences all the time and are just constantly taking pictures sort of for their own collection, of people particularly, not like, I mean, I get it. You want beautiful vistas or you want to take selfies of yourself. You want to take shots of the White Mountains, up in New Hampshire and all that stuff. Oh, I totally get that. But to constantly be taking pictures of other people's and goings on, like nonstop, I don't know. I think somebody's a little fucked in the head when they want to do that. Like there's just something, it seems really creepy to me that somebody wants to take that many pictures, and particularly like of people you don't know. Again, everything's down to time and place and all this, but there's one particular person who just does it like all the time. And I find it really fucking creepy. And I've made it a point to completely avoid the lens of this person. In fact, there was a point around the fire where a picture of me was almost taken, and I ducked right out of it. I don't mind pictures of me being taken. I had so many people, so many fans, so many Sovereign Tech listeners ask me to take a picture with them, get a selfie with them and everything. That's fine. That's no problem. Just, I don't know. I get weirded out by people that are just constantly fucking taking pictures, of other people. And there's never, what I've seen of it, there seems to be there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of consent. Not that you have to ask for consent. Holy shit, but I'm just, this goes back to, it's kind of a dick move. Like what Reason Magazine did. I think that was kind of a dick move. That's it. So anyway, that was going on. Speaking of people, by and large, that was another a positive that I'll give, is that I felt like a lot of the celebritarians that I think really like ruin a scene were not there. That was great. I was really pleased by that. There were a couple people there that if I'd known they were there, I might have like really, said something or whatever. Like Lauren Southern was there. She has, to quote Jeffrey Tucker, there, fascists have no business at an anti-fascist, conference. And she's a fucking fascist. I mean, she's, crazy. Like, watch her videos, read her book. Well, don't if you want to save your sanity. But I probably would have had a blockade to keep her out, since she's so interested in in creating blockades of her own and keeping people from entering other countries. I wouldn't have minded creating a scene in blockading her from getting in. So, but by and large, I mean, I didn't really see anybody that questionable. There were it seemed like a lot of the talks were, just based on what I saw on the schedule, I didn't get to catch really much of the talks, but a lot of Christian centric, a lot of religious centric stuff, whatever, I mean, it's going to be there. I don't care for it. Just based on looking on the schedule and my perception of that could be off base. I wouldn't have stacked. It seemed like really the deck was very much stacked with a lot of religious shit on the schedule. I wouldn't have. I think that looks odd and could detract a lot of people. But I guess maybe it could attract a lot of people. I don't know. But that's just personal taste on my part. So, but really, maybe having the fewer people, maybe having the fewer more bigger names, more commonplace celebritarians there, made the event a whole lot more palatable to me. So, and the PorcFest organizers and whatever, I mean, they treated me wonderfully. So, I have no complaints, as far as that goes. And as far as I know, I think I'm invited to speak next year as well. But I could be wrong about that. But that was, I seem to remember that conversation sort of happening. And it's fine if it doesn't happen. I'm, just putting it out there. And, but I know that, I mean, I got to meet so many wonderful Sovereign Tech listeners. I didn't think, so all right, so yeah, that was wonderful. So again, mostly positive. Let me get into another negative. And this is a negative that actually I've held for years with PorcFest in general. And that is everybody kind of packing guns. I don't want to take away your quote unquote right to guns, even though the right to guns doesn't exist. I'd love for people to explain to me, so where does that come from based on your humanity? I get it. If you feel you have the right to property, okay, then it's property. It's not guns. Get it straight. Let's not beat around the bush. I mean, that's what makes it always sound so insane, right? Is that, oh no, I have a right to guns and right to bear arms and all this stuff. It's like, well, yeah, but humans didn't have guns, thousands of years ago. So where exactly does that right come from? That's why it drives me nuts when people make that argument. Just argue about property. Don't argue about guns. It's fucking stupid. To push that so hard. That's why people think you're crazy, because you sound like I just really want to be able to have a fucking gun, and it makes you sound violent, right? There's people there that had an AK-47 on their back and rifles on their back and whatever, and they were packing various things. In the, when you go to register to get you have to, you wear a wristband or whatever to be able to get access to the talks and everything at PorcFest, and to, get into the event itself and whatever. At the registration desk, they give you a bag, with a bunch of different goodies in it, magazines and, various paraphernalia. In fact, there was a Sheldon Richman book that was in the bag this year that I was like, oh shit, that's worth the price of admission alone. I'll take a Sheldon Richman book. I love Sheldon's work. So anyway, there was a, very, very, kind of brightly, I mean, it was dark, but, very noticeably colored piece of paper that was all guidelines of how to handle your firearms, at PorcFest, including talking about what happens when you're drunk, what happens when you're taking certain substances and all that stuff, which is a very, very valid thing to bring to people's minds. There were a few characters going around that I thought shouldn't have been packing, and they were. But, based upon the way that they were acting and whatever. But I get that. It wasn't as bad. So, in PorcFest years previous, Like, it was really crazy. I mean, you would have, and I've talked about this before on Sovereign Tech, you'd have the combination of like people, using camouflage styled tents, and everybody would be wearing like seemingly like army gear and all this stuff, and they'd be packing guns or whatever. And then in combination with the summer heat, there were times where I said, it's like, wow, PorcFest kind of feels like Afghanistan. This is so wonderful. And I've cracked, I've also, made the observation that if a legitimate news organization came in and said, and was coming to like, this peace festival, which is what I think a lot of people would call PorcFest. They'd call it a peace festival. And they just saw everybody like armed to the teeth. I think they would come off as very odd to somebody new, to the whole scene. So I get it. They want to exercise their rights and all this stuff, and they want to be politically incorrect and whatever. And I don't want to really do anything about that. I still just think it looks like really bad form. In fact, to some degree, it even looks stupid, because some people. I mean, like the argument for having rifles and all this different stuff is that, well, I want to be able to protect myself against whatever happens to come my way. Well, I can tell you, as somebody that has been in the U.S. Army, the first people that you kind of, let's say the worst case scenario happened or whatever, and I'm not talking about a PorcFest. I'm talking about a very abstract general out in the world. Okay. Suddenly everybody just wants to have AK-47s, or not everybody, but a lot of people or certain people want to have AK-47 strapped to their back and all this different shit. Okay. Now, my military training, the first people say there was a revolutionary situation going on, right? It's violent and all this stuff. I don't want this shit to happen. I'm just saying, making the case here. Okay, we're talking hypotheticals. This is a completely hypothetical situation. The first people that would get taken out by the opposing army would be the people with AK-47 strapped on their back. There it is. Like, I mean, you look so stupid when you like are flashing all of this shit. Like, if you're wanting, like, if the Porcupine Freedom Festival, if PorcFest is all about, okay, this is how life can be, well, the very worst thing you want to be doing is showing your heat. Like, having it out there, because that makes you an easy target, like, in life. If there was, I mean, it's all so fucking dumb. It's just so fucking dumb, And you see these people, like, I mean, some people, have these long barrels and everything, and I'm just like, oh my God, like what? Like, what are you even trying to say? Again, I'm not saying go ahead, fucking own guns. I don't care. Do your thing. Have a great time. I'm just saying it looks so stupid. And I think it does so much more harm than good if you're trying to, like, get people on board with, the ideas of liberty and whatever else. It's fucking stupid. And it's just always there. There's always some fucking muprons, flashing this stuff off. And I don't know. I guess maybe there's people who think it's attractive. I think it just looks ridiculous. Even if I was that kind of warrior, soldier type, and all that shit, right? Like, I would call these people idiots. Saying, what the fuck are you doing? Wearing shit like that. What do you think this is? I mean, you're even giving off the sense this is a war zone. Oh, it's just so dumb. It is so dumb. And it's always there. It's never going to change. It's always going to be a part of PorcFest. It's always going to be the thing I'm going to complain about. But I complained about it. I said it. So there. Now, again, that has really nothing to do with the PorcFest organizers. I'm not insulting the institution of PorcFest or whatever. But I'm just saying that the libertarians going around like that, I think you look fucking stupid. And if you're one of them, well, I said it. You can live with what I had to say, okay? And if I lose patrons over it, whatever, I don't care, because are you trying to create liberty for? I mean, this is fine. Like, if you really just want liberty for you, and this isn't about making liberty for a much broader perspective, that's okay. But then, like, what are you doing at PorcFest? Because I kind of thought that was PorcFest's goal, was to like bring in as many people as possible. And get them knowing about the ideas of liberty and everything. I thought, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I need to go back to the website and see what it's all about. I'm just saying that I think that completely achieves the opposite goal of that. So there. Anyway. I'm not saying you're stupid for owning a gun. I'm just saying, doing the macho flash and everything there, and like you're big shit. It comes off as the exact opposite, because well, whatever. I could talk about guns forever, and I'm not going to keep talking about it. Nothing wrong with owning guns. Nothing wrong with having a gun. Nothing wrong with packing. I think it's crazy to be, to go to the extremes, and everything else that people there do. It's just it's too much. So anyway, let's see what else we got. Yeah, I mean, I didn't get to catch some of the events. I know there's the popular one, Soapbox Idol, where everybody can kind of get up on the stage and they can. I actually got asked to be a judge for Soapbox Idol this year. Because of varying reasons, I didn't get. I wasn't available to do it, but I was honored to be asked. It would have been interesting. I mean, people get up there and they just start ranting and raving, or a lot of people actually also asked me to participate, to be one of the, idols on Soapbox, right? But as far as I know, that was great. That went really well, and so a lot of fun to be had. Something that was brought up that, and I could be wrong about this, just based upon what I saw, that was brought up by Paige Peterson, actually, on the Sovereign Tech Prime episode this week, was that Bitcoin, like cryptocurrency, was there. Blockchain was there. Those technologies were certainly talked about, part of the program, etc. But like Bitcoin, I didn't see Bitcoin really being in use, and of course that's because the fees were ridiculous. I mean, if you went to buy a sandwich from somebody that accepted Bitcoin, you'd pay twice the price for the sandwich. I mean, it was just, it's really crazy what's happening with that. When in the past, like Bitcoin was, Bitcoin companies were one of the major sponsors of PorcFest. So that was interesting that how that ended up shaping up. I mean, there were still blockchain companies that were sponsoring it, but yeah, I thought that was very, very interesting. That how that ended up really taking shape. The Wi-Fi situation there, the internet situation has always been a bit of a problem, because you end up, you get 1,000 or how, I don't know that there's even 1,000 people there this year, but however many people you end up getting at PorcFest. Usually, that clogs the, the lines. I mean, like Verizon was always the one that worked really well up there. I think it's different now. Now Sprint also works up there. But anyway, the internet situation seemed to be far superior this year. In fact, it was being sponsored by, there was like a little Wi-Fi setup that was being sponsored by a company. And phone signals seem to be okay. I mean, there was some problems where people weren't getting messages right away or whatever else, but by and large, the internet situation that I saw was a far superior situation to years previous. So kudos for that. That was really cool. Even though, again, I don't think Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies were really, like a part of the program so much. I felt like also there was a lot more diversity this year. Like across the board, I felt like there was a lot more women, a lot more POCs, all that. And that was really interesting to see. That's just, I mean, that's an opinion based on my perspective. It's not like I walked around the entire grounds to really know. But I thought that was, that was a nice shift to see. And yeah, I mean, by and large, like I said, it was a very positive thing. Despite anything else that I've said, I thought this PorcFest was pretty good. And I'm not just saying that because I was asked to speak at it, even though that was very nice. And I had a lot of people, say that, wow, they really loved, my talks, and that, in fact, Lynn Albrecht, she apparently skipped out kind of on one of her own little events just to come and see me talk, and she thought it was great. And then I was really honored by that. Boy, she's just remarkable. And yeah, it was just overall, it was really a great time. I don't know how much more else really to say on it. I didn't see too much crazy, not really, but I think part of that could have been because, and what I mean by crazy is like, more of the woo shit, and I don't know. I mean, like there was definitely a lot of, there's a religious bent to some degree, to the event like I described. But yeah, I wasn't seeing a whole lot of woo stuff, nothing too crazy, which I thought was kind of, it's kind of nice, just in my opinion. I mean, maybe it was happening in areas that I didn't see. But But, I think part of the reason that was so was that you didn't have so many of these celebritarians that have really gone completely off the deep end. As far as like what they're recommending and what they're, telling people to do in life and what their cult of personalities are following them into. It's interesting. I've noticed in the past couple of years, and it was probably happening before too, but like a lot of celebritarians, they're really just pretty much going into shamanism. Not necessarily tribalism, even though there's some of that, but like full-on shamanism, where, they're recommending just like all this wacky fucking shit, like, totally, no longer evidence or science-based anything. It's really getting crazy. And a lot of this shamanistic stuff is just, it's becoming the norm. It's what it seems to be the new trend in liberty. In fact, I didn't get to talk about this on a Sovereign Tech Prime episode, and I had lined it up to do so. But the New York Post did an article about a family that were breatharians. Fortunately, didn't see any of that at PorcFest. But if you don't know what breatharianism is this conspiracy theory that humans really don't need to eat or drink, that they live off the energy of the universe. And there is apparently this family that is, they call themselves breatharians. Now, in the New York Post story, I'll probably talk about this on Sovereign Tech, maybe even this week. In the New York Post story, like this family admits, no, they drink water, they eat on social occasions and whatever else. So, they're not really breatharians because they're not completely eschewing, consuming things. And they have children and all this other wacky shit. It's really crazy. But you just wait. Breatharianism, that's probably going to be the next big trend in liberty, libertarianism and like voluntarists and anarcho-capitalist kind of circles, I think. Right now the big trend is ayahuasca and, this other bullshit. But yeah, I think that's going to be our next one. So keep an eye out for that. Again, fortunately didn't really hear or see anything like that at PorcFest. So anyway, I don't know that I have a whole lot more to say on it, but just it was very nice. It was great getting to see people that I haven't seen in a while. Great getting to meet a lot of Sovereign Tech patrons, Sovereign Tech listeners. Great to bring on a lot of new listeners. That's very exciting for me. It was just. Yeah, it was a great time. People come from all over the place, all over the world, to be at PorcFest, and it's it's really cool. I've always felt that way. That aspect of it is really just so fantastic. That and it's great too because it kind of shows like this whole notion of liberty, of personal freedom, and all that. It's not just something for the white folk. Like everybody from all over the world, all kinds of crazy countries, will show up at PorcFest, and I think that's awesome, and it kind of proves the point. So anyway, I think that pretty much covers it. This was just meant to be a little episode, just describing what I thought of the whole thing. I know there were other events kind of going on at the same time. Like there's the Michigan Peace, Love, and Liberty Fest, I think something like that. That was happening, and some people were speaking there. And I know Jeffrey Tucker had to skip out on being at PorcFest because he had another event that he had to go to. This is that is certainly exciting too. That these kind of festivals are being held like all the time now, and at points where certainly, obviously in the north, where it's the weather is a bit more palatable to everybody. But it's cool that so many of these things are happening, that people have the choice to go to different ones and whatever else is going on. I will say that about the weather. This is probably, okay, so I was in a hotel room, so I didn't have to deal with the rain. It rained a lot, during PorcFest this year. There's years where that happens, years where it doesn't happen, years where it's 50-50. And I know like sometimes it was torrential rain and people had to kind of deal with that. And I feel bad that they had to deal with it or whatever. I'll tell you, if you ever decide to go to PorcFest, you get what's called an XWT tent, which stands for extreme weather tent. Like, get shit. Here's a tip from the Golden Stallion. If you want to go camping, you want to hang out in a tent, and I love camping. I love staying in tents. You got to spend at least $600 on a tent. You cannot get away. Like, you're not going to handle I mean, and New Hampshire isn't even known for its rain, but you're not even going to be able to handle New Hampshire rain if you're buying, you know, a $100, $200 tent, or even like a $50 tent, obviously, from like Walmart or something. You really want to spend the money on a great tent to be able to survive, you know, or I mean, to handle anywhere that you happen to, you know, camp at a festival. So, yeah, I mean, and I looked around and I'm like, oh, not a lot of expensive tents out there. This is going to be bad. And it was bad. Everybody was talking about how they got rained out and everything. Well, there you go. You know, you got to put the money in when it comes to a great tent. I'm a big fan of like Cabela's. Like they sell the different styles, like the XWTs that can handle crazy winds, and you know you could camp in Alaska with them and everything. I mean that's kind of the style that you want to rock with. So anyway, but the weather was really good this year. Like it was never like too blistering hot. I mean I got sunburned, but part of the reason was I actually, you know, I walked around with a tank top and I wanted to get a tan. Like I have some crazy white skin where I've worn a shirt and I want to get rid of that. As where, you know, a good chunk of me, particularly from being in the military, like, you know, is plenty tan, you know, and can handle just about any sun that comes down. So I really wanted to get that. So, but regardless, I mean, largely it was very cool. Like the weather was not bad at all during the event, which is kind of rare for PorcFest. Like usually it's pretty blistering hot, kind of like I was describing earlier. So again, overall, just a great time. The only regrets I have are that I didn't get to hang out with more people. Like there was a lot of people I would have loved to have spent a ton more time with, that I had planned on spending time with, that I wanted to, you know, and record with and whatever else, and that just didn't get to happen. Thanks to the PorcFest organizers for, you know, giving me such a great stage, such a great venue, you know, to contribute to and to be a part of. That was a real honor. And I hope that, you know, I don't know what kind of feedback they get. I hope that I was a positive part of it. So there you go. All, you know, and I think I only had a couple complaints. I mean, my two complaints aside, this is just, you know, PorcFest was a good time, this year. And, you know, maybe I know I hinted at, I think it was in episode 231 of Sovereign Tech, with Paige, that we would talk about the point of the Free State Project. I think that would make for a hell of a Patreon episode. And so that's something that maybe you can look forward to, that we'll knock out. I have other content coming out this week. Of course, I will also have the Q&A, the Wednesday Q&A will come out, and we're probably, keep an eye out, okay, for the post, on Patreon, because we're going to have to do the June version of the live Q&A hangout. This month, we're going to have to do that. Patreon is supposed to be making that like they're baking in kind of that live streaming technology. I'll take advantage of Patreon's version of it when that comes out. But for right now, we're using Google Hangouts. So, you know, we'll do that. We'll make all those happen. So you got great content coming out this week as well. Even more than just the Wednesday Q&A. And I think, and I'm just saying, I think that there should be a new Sex and Science Hour out this week as well. And of course, got a dynamite. I already know what I have lined up for Sovereign Tech this week. It's going to be awesome. We're going to have a great time. So anyway, that's it. PorcFest, woo, good times. Love, you know, I mean, I love New Hampshire. It's such a beautiful place. It really is. That whole geographic area is just wonderful. I particularly love northern New Hampshire. I think it's just stunning. Possibly the best part of the state, as long as you don't, you know, of the geographic area, not the state. As long as you don't mind not having all the modern conveniences of, you know, of all the different restaurants and stores, perhaps. I mean, what you need is there, but. Anyway, yeah, it was just a fantastic time. Got to hang out with some really cool people and some old friends that often live far away, and so it was cool to spend so much time with them. But anyway, there it is. There's my review of PorcFest. Like I said, mostly positive. I'll see you on the other side.